Hello and welcome. My name is William Carver. I'm the Core Services and Alliances Director here at SCC, working as part of our digital workplace practice. And welcome to SCC Simplify. We're going to be talking today a little bit about persona mapping and why that's important to organisations. And I'm joined by two of my colleagues here, Paulo and Paul. Paulo, would you like to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. My name is Paulo Pessoa. I'm part of the Experience Services team at SCC. My role as delivery consultant really has a focus on productivity, but actually the other focus is about personas and device personas specifically, which we'll be talking a little bit about today.
Cool.
And hi, Paul Wooldridge. So I'm digital workplace pre-sales lead. So I look after the team of solution architects, which are the people who really bring the professional services projects together.
Cool. Okay. So look, we're going to talk about personas and persona mapping. This is a bit of an odd one. Lots of organizations have got one device and that's what they deploy for everybody and that's the way it is. What are some of the limitations with that as an approach?
I guess it's dated now, isn't it? I mean, if you're looking at a workforce, there's so many different variations of the workforce, but actually there's the specialisms now that exist within a workforce just doesn't really, work having just that one device fits all, with all the different roles that you're seeing in the modern day workforce.
It's understandable as well why people do it, because they think they've got the economy of scale. Again, traditional methods of kind of deployment, which we've spoken about in a previous episode, kind of almost dictate what you're going to get. It's
sure.
like, to do those. And what you want to do is the flexibility. I think the North Star that you're always looking for is the employee experience.
Right.
And that's, the devices that you put in front of people are the biggest kind of impact that you have
Sure.
on their day-to-day experience, not only in your organization, but also on their productivity as well.
And it's the thing that IT organizations get judged by, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with a traditional view of one device fits all, you see two extremes, don't you? You see like the first extreme where, you have one device that really is probably overpowered for that user. So as an organization, you've probably spent too much money in terms of basically giving that device to that user. And the other extreme then, you'd say, Paul, is the opposite, isn't it? It's basically you've got these users actually have a device that isn't powerful enough, and that just affects their productivity directly.
Yeah, it also it affects their kind of experience of work on those ones, and that's when you're trying to retain and attract the best talent into your business. That's where it tends to go wrong, and that's where a lot of the times. That kind of one size fits all is where a lot of the user problems are actually coming from.
Sure.
And the other thing that kind of popped into my head as well is that you've got then the refresh, which I'm sure we'll get onto on these parts. But all of a sudden you're going cap in hand back to the business to say, hey, I need another massive lump of cash just to replace all these laptops and desktops and things and all the devices that are in there. Chances are there might not actually be anything wrong with them, and
Sure.
the people are actually really satisfied. Actually, you impact their things by replacing it and spending a hell of a lot of money you might not even have.
Yeah, look, and that's a really important point in the market at the moment, right? Because actually the cost of these devices is going up. I mean, I'm talking to customers all the time around device supply at the moment, and it is a real challenge. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what's going on in the market?
Well, we know it's the big AI boom, right? That's the key thing. Is it right now today it's about the kind of the RAM that's going into the devices.
Right.
There's a massive demand at the moment because we want the kind of AI workloads, all the things that are going into the data centers, all the brake horsepower that we need in order to run the AI is having a knock-on effect into that kind of consumer and the end user market. So all of a sudden now we're looking at like shortages on kind of RAM and those types of things that are all hitting the kind of the supply chain, even though you always just assume that there's an abundance of machines and we're used to that, click next finish and the laptop arrives. That's not the reality that we're facing at the moment.
Sure. I mean, I've been kind of looking at this quite closely because it impacts my world as somebody that does device supply, and looking at the way that effectively the AI has gone and bought, or AI organizations have gone and bought a lot of the RAM. That's then pushed the enterprise market, so servers and networking in particular and storage, to go and buy some of that. And then kind of the device market's getting the third bite of the cherry in a limited amount of capacity, right?
Absolutely. And the RAM manufacturers are a bit reticent to kind of increase productivity. And, it's not as easy as just standing up another kind of manufacturing suite to do that. That's a massive investment for them. And I think that there might even be people like looking at it going, is this just a bubble? is it just a trend? So if I go out and I build more manufacturing capability, and all of a sudden that bubble bursts or collapses, or all of a sudden you don't have that and we're over the trend, you've just made a massive investment. That what are you going to do with it? So it's not like they can just instantly increase supply as well.
And this is a long-term problem, right? This is going to be something we're going to have to live with for the next couple of years.
Oh yeah.
So thinking about that in context, so we've talked a bit about why you might want to start looking at personas from different styles of working, different kinds of working, that user experience, and then the device supply piece. How do you think that people should start to think about personas? Where do you sort of see that fitting in? What's the approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, it's analyzing, your workforce, but also the devices that basically, that your workforce are using. And I guess what we're doing at SCC is, there's so much, it's so data driven.
Sure.
But also there's a whole piece of the sentiment part of it as well, and understanding how users roles actually, rely on those devices. I mean, we use the traditional, well, I say traditional in terms of SCC, but we talk a lot about basically our X data, our T data, and our O data. And our X data obviously is that sentiment piece. We are meeting up with our customers, and we're basically interviewing customers, but also interviewing a selection of users within an organization to basically understand how they fit in and actually how their device usage fits in. And then we look at obviously the O data, which is your operational data. And again, it comes back to roles, and we work with leaderships in terms of looking at how those roles actually fit in. But the important part that we're seeing is getting under the hood and actually that the T data, the technical data. Mm-hmm. And this is the stuff that we rely on a DEX tool, so a digital employee experience tool for those that haven't come across it. I mean, it's the valuable insight into exactly how that estate of the is actually being used by each of these individuals, and from there we can really build a picture, tell a story, and then we find what type of persona that device actually fits into, and that then helps us to look at whether it's basically, refreshing and upgrading the systems, even talking about RAM there, Paul. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things that we found with a couple of our customers is it isn't always about the RAM. No. Sometimes you've seen, customers think, oh, it's RAM, maybe can we get hold of some RAM? And actually when you overlay a DEX tool, and you can sometimes actually see it isn't the RAM that's actually causing the slowdown of some devices. It could be the CPU. It could even be basically the hard drive. There's basically, you see these personas of users that actually save a lot of their raw files locally.
Sure.
And suddenly, their devices are, they've reached that limit of basically, they've got something like about 10 gigs left of their hard drives, and they're hitting that brick wall. So it's not always the RAM, but actually when it is the RAM, again, a good DEX tool tells you that it is the RAM. And from there, you can also then plan a RAM upgrade if you're not actually, doing a device upgrade.
Just thinking about that. So we've talked a bit about profile. I think it's important to just define for people, because you could, in what you've just described there, go, well, each individual user has their own persona, but that's not quite what you mean, is it? How would we define what a persona is versus what a profile is?
No, I mean, you hear personas a lot these days. I know at SCC we have various different personas, from support personas, from device personas, but really a persona is a representation of a group of people or a group of devices. And it typically looks at, so when we're looking at the device persona, the types of applications that they'll be using, the performance requirements that they'll be using, the type of work that they'll be doing, and also, where they'll be doing that kind of work, whether they are going to be remote workers, or whether they're going to be office workers, or whether they're going to be hybrid workers. So you take a whole, sort of variation, and that's how that's what a persona is, where I guess profile is more about specifics in terms of
next level.
Yeah. So I mean, how would you describe when you look at your profiles?
Mm-hmm. Well, I am the typical kind of information worker. Give me a laptop that's connected to Microsoft 365, give me my email, give me my Teams, give me my OneDrive, I'm away.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's about
That-
permissions, isn't it? Profiles
Yeah.
is more about what permissions do you have
Yeah.
to basically access and certain parts of the systems.
I've really not got a kind of complicated one. So again, giving me a Copilot Plus device or anything with real brake horsepower and things like that. And I move around a lot. I go to different offices and stuff. So again, the kind of the weight of the laptop is a bit of a consideration and things like that. But it's very rarely disconnected from the power sort of thing. So again, but it's all of those. But what I really like about the kind of the persona since I've been at SCC and I've started to dive into this subject, because I never touched on employee experience. I couldn't even tell you what it was sort of thing when I first came in. And now I've been here a bit longer and I'm working with the employee experience team and really understanding it. Before, that persona work was more art than science.
Sure.
What you're doing with the kind of the DEX tool and what Paulo's talking about is all of it, you're tipping that balance where it's a lot more science. There's still a bit of art, like you said, of actually getting out your seat, talking to the people, that you need to talk to in order to build that. It's not enough just to install the DEX tool.
Sure.
It's also doing that work behind it that gives you that much more kind of rounded. And with all the kind of customers and the outputs that I've seen, you're never looking at more than 4, 5 personas.
Really, as few as that.
As few as
few as that. You don't really want to overcomplicate. You don't need to kind of overcomplicate it. And the reality is there's so many customers out there that actually do have the DEX tools. They do actually, they're already running the DEX tools, and maybe they're not even using that to basically create these personas. They're still relying on someone basically maybe from IT saying, oh, actually, this is what we need. We need
not science, yeah.
Absolutely not science. We need just a knowledge worker and an exec.
Yeah.
And those are your two personas, and it doesn't really lend itself.
Sure.
But that's what us techies do, right? We get into the detail, and it's important with the persona to don't get in the weeds of it just because you won't get as much value. You put in a lot of effort, but you won't get the value.
So because that's a really good point. So there's clearly some pitfalls in here because you could overanalyze the data, or you can underanalyze the data. What are the kind of data points you're going to look at? You talked about different kinds of things already, but where would you go and get that data from?
Yeah, so we talked about obviously picking it up from the DEX tool. I mean, at SCC, we analyze. I mean, a DEX tool these days, and you're looking at about 500 different data points. I'm probably a data geek, and I'm probably as happy with data as a pig in mud. So I can sit there and analyze data. But what we've specifically done is we kind of look at about 80 different technical points that from a DEX tool, but it is things from, and I'm not going to go through all of the 80 here because I probably can't remember them all, but you are looking at the CPU usage and how hard it's being run. You are looking at RAM, and you are looking at GPUs and how they're being processed. You're looking at applications, how are different applications being run? Are they running successfully and basically without that delay, which basically causes additional friction and additional issues with productivity. You're looking at batteries. I think we just talked about batteries before. How devices are being used. I mean, are they always plugged in? Are they being shared? In itself, we have customers that share devices, and that itself has another type of persona that you basically look at. The types of peripherals that are basically plugged into a device. All of these kind of build up that picture. So when you are designing a persona, you're having a really good idea of exactly what this kind of persona needs in terms of when you are doing a device refresh.
Do you have to have a DEX tool installed to be able to do this?
That's an interesting point that actually a lot of people have tried to shortcut it, I think.
Sure.
By literally purchasing a DEX tool, putting it in, deploying it, and going,
Job's
done.
good enough.
Yeah. Well, but that's the problem. Is like all the tool is doing is gathering data. If you don't have those people kind of behind you and everything that can actually turn that into real kind of insights that you can actually action, then it's probably going to fall. And all you've got is a big cost of a DEX tool where you can probably turn around and say, yeah, we've got DEX. Have you? You've got a DEX tool, but...
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's so many different DEX tools as well out there. But you do need a technical DEX tool out there.
Yeah,
you do need it. To get the technical part, you do. We've seen some customers that have a more of a sentiment DEX tool, where it's a lot of it's based upon the sentiment piece. And when we talk about sentiment, it's literally asking their employees questions and literally saying, Paul, how are you finding your device today? Good. Give it out of 5.
But it's important because again, because a lot of people will look at it and say, well, in-tune analytics and things like that do that for me. It's like, yes, it does. It takes you part of the way. What's missing from that is the sentiment.
Yeah. Okay.
So
you've got to
again,
take
if you
both.
don't, yeah, exactly. If you don't, you just, again, art, science sort of things on those ones. You just take it to science. You're not. It's still a useful tool, and it's still something that you can do. But the DEX tooling, especially like with kind of things of the Nextink and the HPs and everything, really take it to that next level. But
Right.
it's so important to have a kind of a service behind it that can really extract what that means for you.
So we touched on it a minute ago, and you mentioned around refresh cycles. I think it's worth perhaps re-emphasizing. How can you use personas to help inform what you do when you're thinking about refresh?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I guess the biggest thing is once you've identified those personas, you identify, what the needs are in terms of the devices. But what we're seeing a lot of is basically the ability to actually say, do we go out and just basically buy these, typical 5 personas, 5 different devices? Not necessarily, because what we can be looking at doing is, and this really comes down to basically the recycle, the reallocate, repurpose. I mean, we'll talk about lots of rewords here, won't we? But there's a real benefit in doing this. So if you're looking at a device, let's say for a persona that's basically a specialist, a developer, basically they no longer are getting the productivity out of that device, and we're looking at refreshing. Well, maybe actually that device can still be used further down the line by a different persona that doesn't actually need that much heavy lifting from their device, should we say. Yeah. And there's a huge amount of savings that you can basically make there. So personas, again, it kind of helps you before you kind of go out and just spend the money. First of all, it basically, make sure that actually the devices that you have, how many of those devices need to be refreshed? And of those that you basically need to be refreshed, how many can you still reuse within the organization before you then go and just basically spend the money buying and purchasing new devices?
It's smarter refreshing.
Absolutely
That's where you
smarter.
want to kind of get to is you're replacing the device because it's 4 years old or 3 years old. It's like the other great thing of the DEX tool is kind of measuring the actual score.
Sure.
So again, you've got a bit of a kind of measurement that you can do, is then you can really kind of target on those ones. And some of the recycling capabilities that we have at SCC, I've been round the recycling plant. It took me about 2 months when I joined, but it was really worth it, because one of the things that got to me was literally to put a brand new device and a recycled device next to each other. And at first glance, I couldn't tell. So just because a device is recycled, like the services that we've got, means that it's not coming with the kind of the cracked skin and the keys missing, and that you can't tell if that's an E or a T or something like that. It's not. It's coming out, and the user experience is still really, really good.
There's a really important part in all organisations today looking at sustainability, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And a persona is a key part of trying to inform that decision and how you tackle that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So not only are you talking about in terms of sustainability pressures that basically a lot of our customers are feeling, looking at, but actually it's what we're trying to do basically for the good of the world, isn't it?
Absolutely. It goes deeper than
it goes deeper than that. So actually having the ability to keep assets longer, and actually, so basically, the biggest part of basically, the carbon footprint is manufacturing.
Sure.
So if you can keep basically your devices longer, then that ticks that sustainability box. But also one of the things that we're doing a lot of now with some of our customers is again, talking about, how does sustainability work in terms of having the right device with the right users? Because what we also see is power consumption, the carbon footprint.
Sure.
If you've got a device that is being overworked, we've all been there. The processor is going crazy, the fan is going crazy, but that
heavy Excel spreadsheets,
everything is going crazy. But literally, your device is overworking. It's drawing on the grid, and we can see that from the DEX tool these days. That actually devices that basically are underpowered, they're drawing so much more energy out of the grid than those that actually just fit correctly to what a persona needs, to what that user needs. And actually it's just smoothing along, nice and smooth. It's just basically, it's performing, it's not drawing too much energy. And we can see that from our DEX analysis.
And you can see the way that the users are responding to it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, that's the key thing. Is like, it's one thing to say, oh, well, I'll just put that in front of you and then see you later in, X amount of years time when it's the refresh, or that person's like raising tickets or going to their manager complaining constantly. No, the DEX tool can actually get you ahead of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, kind of thinking about that. So clearly making choices around sustainability is important. I guess also choices around adoption of new technology, right? So things like Win365, always connected devices, AI PCs. Do you start to look at that level of detail when you're thinking about persona? Like, exactly, what do I use and where do I use it? Is that kind of where you're trying to get to?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's, again, that smarter kind of refresh where you might turn around and go, again, with the one size fits all, well, I'm going to give everyone a laptop because we might have another pandemic.
Yeah.
That's a pretty smart way of thinking about it. But again, in terms of your costs going through the roof, you're giving someone a laptop that, like I say, never comes off the desk.
Yeah.
You start to think about like the idea as well of like some of the personas that we've seen, like with frontline worker. You see some of the things that Microsoft's doing in the Win365 world around frontline. So all of a sudden then you're not giving the frontline worker, or you're putting a desktop in there. You're putting a smaller thin client device that's connecting to a cloud PC, where all of a sudden you've got shift workers where I'm not making you purchase a license for Win365 and you want, you're almost sharing the license because it's always going to be the same amounts that are on the shifts. So all of a sudden, but again, without that persona work, you're almost guessing. You're almost going, well, I'll try this and I'll invest in the professional services maybe to get Windows 365 up and running and test it and run it up the flagpole and see who salutes. Art. We want to get more to science, where it goes, actually, the persona goes, this is a really good fit for perhaps a frontline worker is, no, let's not put a desktop out there or anything. Let's put a simple thin client on there, give them a Win365, and then, like I say, use the frontline Win365 because they still need a full desktop and things like that. That's the kind of things that you can inform so that you're looking at your strategy then with a bit more data behind you.
And you can make those decisions around refurbished, brand new devices, top-end devices, and have that mix.
It is smart device refresh, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
In its sense, and you're not just doing this, and this is the important thing, you're not just doing this once every 2-3 years whenever you think, right, I've come to the end of the device life cycles. It's continuous.
Yep.
If you have that DEX tool, it's continuous. And you could be just, and then you're purchasing devices throughout your year as and when you need it. You're making those decisions. So it's not going to be just a big cost at the end of the 3 or 4 year cycle that we've seen a lot of customers do.
And what we spoke about in a previous episode, that's where the modern management comes in as well, because again, it makes you a lot more flexible, makes you a lot more kind of prepared that, 1 month we might be doing 200 PCs, the next month we might be doing 20. But again, you can actually make the decision then. Actually, should I do a Snapdragon device maybe for, Snapdragon being the processor, which the whole kind of thing of it is it's a new kind of architecture.
Sure. Yeah.
And what that means is it's saving on those kind of batteries. So you think about your field sales that are constantly out the office and things like that, giving them, like you say, the one size fits all and everything means that they can only get about 3-4 hours out the battery. Actually, just by moving it to a Snapdragon device, maybe they can get, I don't know, let's make it like 16 hours without the next charge and everything. But then again, you're not then looking at going, okay, well, we need to figure out how the hell this is going to work. And what about the GPUs? And it needs to come back. No, it can just be deployed down, basically, using the modern management, and you can refresh it and you can take those left and right turns as you need.
I'm conscious of time, guys, because we're sort of coming to the end. But if people want to start this process, they want to get on the journey in personas with SCC, what's the first step?
Yeah, I mean, we offer an advisory in terms of device-led persona refreshes. So just get in touch with us and we'll be happy to basically talk the customers through it. If they already have a DEX tool, great. We can really help them basically advise them on how to get the best out of that DEX tool. If they haven't, it's not a deal breaker. It's something they just need to speak to us about, and we'll talk about the next steps from there. But it's it's just getting in touch really. If you're interested in what you've heard, if you're thinking about doing a device refresh soon, pretty much all the customers we've spoken to recently, this is where they're going.
There's some really good case studies on the website as well. Around kind of some of the customers that we've worked for and done on there. So again, if you want to see how it helped those guys as well, check out the website on the case studies.
Okay, I guess the elephant in the room, how long does this take, right? Because people are going to ask that.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how big the customer is, but we would probably say an advisory, probably looking at 15 to 20 days worth of work.
Right.
to basically get this in, get the personas basically back to the customer, play it back to them, and then basically then we then talk about the next steps. But it's not a huge investment.
Which, given that you're going to be potentially spending an awful lot of money on new devices, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, but it's a
Relatively
worthwhile
marginal.
investment.
Yeah, take
Absolutely.
a beat and do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you very much, both. I mean, if there are people that are listening to this that want to get in touch, you can go to scc.com. There's a contact form on there, so you can just fill that out. Alternatively, do reach out to your account manager or look any of us up on LinkedIn and message us through that, and we'll be delighted to respond. But both of you, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you all again soon.